privilege to be here, and also on the panel with my fellow speakers. My daughters were IVF, so it was a great thrill to be sitting next to Robert Winston there for a moment. I guess I'm a space entrepreneur, and I thought, well, listen, let's do something optimistic about what's happening with this thing called the new space race. The thing is, this idea of new space has actually been around about 20 years, perhaps longer. And when I first came to the UK, I came to a conference on new space, and there were astronauts and cosmonauts around the table, and they all went and introduced themselves and had spent many hours and days in space. And then it came around to me, and I was like, well, I'm a sustainability guy, really. I didn't have any background, but they all looked at me and said, well, that's why we're here. And so there's this sort of perhaps not well articulated but intrinsic relationship between space and looking after our planet. And this was obviously famously the observation of Bill Anders when they went to the moon for the first time. And his quote was, we went to the moon to explore the moon, but of course in the process we discovered the fragility of our planet. But people are getting very excited about this thing. It is actually called the New Space Race. This is a photo I took of a paper in Washington a couple of years ago, and it's led by these characters, these billionaires, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Paul Allen and Richard Branson. There's a lot of excitement and a lot of money, and I think there's a sense that something interesting is happening. Jeff Bezos wants to move all of our manufacturing off-world and turn the Earth into a garden. And of course, there's the 5G revolution, which is about to either empower us massively with robotics or irradiate us. The vote's still out on that, I guess. And then there's this explosion of entrepreneurship. This is a garage, as our friends in America say, in Silicon Valley called the Rainbow Mansion, and it is the homebrew computer club. If you're a computer geek, you'll know what I'm talking about, of new space. There have been 4 or 5 new space startups that have come out of this garage, and what's amazing about it, you can see the drawings on the wall. There's this sort of amazing patina of drawings and sketches from all the startups that have been there. And this company, Planet Labs, have now created a ring of small satellites that scan the planet every 90 minutes and give us a very high temporal resolution of what's happening on Earth. But new space has a dark secret, which I'm going to share with you. And the dark secret is all of these startups, all of them, SpaceX, Made in Space, Planet, they all are dependent on the public sector. The public sector is always the first customer. And so despite the case making for I guess, the private enterprise, ultimately you still need a customer, you still need a reason. And space hasn't quite found its reason. I think there's a lot of excitement about space resources, there's a lot of excitement about going back to the moon, but the big idea has not been identified. I think looking for life, that's a big idea, and we should be doing that. But the reason to build a space economy still isn't well articulated. And I'm going to suggest here today that the race should have a different finish line, and that actually the ultimate public sector is our planet. So this talk is also about AI, and I think of AI as a bit like the movie The Twin Towers, when Gandalf comes over the horizon at the last minute and saves the good guys from Sauron and his minions. And I unfortunately am a pragmatist about where we are in terms of the state of the planet. I don't think we have got very long. But I believe that AI is a huge amplifier in terms of making a difference. And I wanted to quickly talk about how I believe that is going to be the case. And really, this is the diagram that brings it to life for me. And it really shows the power of machine learning. And a lot of people obviously get excited about ML and its ability to determine puppies from chihuahuas or chihuahuas from muffins. And it's incredible what AI can do in terms of classification. But it also has this amazing ability to see patterns in multi-dimensional data. And this is the thing about human beings. We aren't very good at this. We are mammals. Our mammal brains, our mammal eyes, our mammal ears only really limit us to 6 or so senses, if you consider that motion and balance is a sense. We have a sort of temporal capacity of about 3 months. That's sort of before, if you like, our memory goes into RAM and we can't sort of project further or back. We live in this temporal bubble of about 3 months. But of course, computers can see, infinite, years, hundreds of years into the past. They can see patterns in multiple dimensions, hundreds of dimensions. And this is the breakthrough. This is the thing which AI can do, which is going to change the world. So we've been working on this concept. We've been sort of a loose working title, Mission Control for Earth, and this isn't meant to invoke a lot of people in a room with screens making decisions on behalf of others. This is really just a kind of conceptual framework for organizing this sort of vision of an intelligence or a way of using AI for planetary stewardship. And of course, this needs data. And I just wanted to take you through a little bit of the data sources just so you can understand. And I think hopefully in this audience, most people will be tracking these sorts of things. But you have satellites from ESA, NOAA, NASA, Maxar, Planet Labs. And then you have ground truth, so information that's captured from devices on the ground, Internet of Things devices like this USGS flood monitor. Then you have physical models. Our physics gives us an understanding of the universe, and we have supercomputers that can start to predict how things are going to go based on our understanding of complex systems. And then lastly, we have data from the ground and from people and from citizen scientists and mobile phones. And it's really the fusion of all these data sets which allows us to do magical things. So how can ML and data fusion help us better manage the planet? That's the dream. And so if you aren't familiar with machine learning, essentially it kind of provides 3 capacities for us. One, foresight, so machine learning can make predictions. Just-in-time insight, so machine learning can classify things very rapidly. And better decisions, so machine learning can factor multi-dimensional data, as I've been saying. So can we prepare for a changing climate? Can we provide better insight during the fog of a disaster? Can we better broker resources for faster mitigation and recovery? Well, I sort of believe we can. So this is the sort of thing that we're hoping to be able to do. Look at the sort of entire system of a problem, provision of capital and aid, identification of the most vulnerable areas, thinking about how to better design our cities and towns for resilience, information flow during a disaster event, being a first responder and helping first responders in the heat of the moment, and then prediction and detection. And so I wanted to sort of show a few case studies along the sort of journey of resilience planning, from making sure a city is ready for a future event to actual disaster response, and also the rebuilding and recovering, which, as we've seen from Haiti and other unfortunate catastrophes in recent times, is actually where there's been a lot of loss of life. And this is a ML that we created this year. It's a generalizable ML, which is a way of saying it works on the whole world, that can predict the likelihood of flooding based on a known rainfall. So again, this is data fusion. It's using satellite imagery, radar, and stream gauge data. It was done on stream gauges in the United States. The United States is big enough to give us enough different geographies that we can then adapt that for the whole planet. And what these blue dots are showing essentially is the likelihood of a flood in a certain region. And so the ability to predict based on a known rainfall if a town is going to flood, this is of course hugely valuable for resilience planning. So this is exactly sort of how it works. Accumulated rainfall, river basin characteristics, the ML learns these things, and then land use and topography. And this work I'm showing now is twice as good than NOAA's state-of-the-art predictions, which don't use machine learning. Another capability which we developed last year was this notion of the fact that a lot of the world's poor essentially are unmapped. This idea that there are approximately 1 billion people that live in informal settlements, and in disasters and catastrophes, these people are unequally affected. But wouldn't it be great if we could know where they are? And so this machine learning mechanism uses high-res optical. It's trained on the rooftops of informal settlements, and you can see here in this diagram it's showing the blue areas, which are informal settlements that haven't been mapped before using machine learning. This technology, similarly made this year, this is the time to peak. So this is a technology for use in the moment during a disaster itself. And of course, the floods are coming. You want to know whether to evacuate a town, knowing how long it's going to take before that river floods, and the time to peak flood is critical information. And so this ML provides that prediction with a very, very high degree of accuracy about when that river flood is going to happen. And you can see here sort of estimation that it'll be 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon, and that's of course the time to get your sandbags out or evacuate. The other just-in-time problem that disaster responders have is they need maps. And this is the normal journey of map creation in a disaster scenario. It can take up to 48 hours. You can see here all the steps along that journey from a disaster all the way through to getting all the charter owners of the different data sets, providing all of the resources required to make a map, and then getting that to the disaster response can take up to 2 days. And the great tragedy of this is, of course, as we've seen, a lot of loss of life happens in the first 24 hours of a flood. So we said, well, could we solve this problem by actually doing all of the computing on a satellite itself? So this ML, machine learning, is designed to run on a small satellite, which we're calling the CatSat. And this can do and create maps, very high degree of accuracy, within a minute. And these maps are small enough to be sent directly down via UHF to a mobile phone on the ground. And this, again, just showing the results. So there's the ground truth. The ground truth is the actual flood produced by people going around after the flood event and looking at mud levels on the side of buildings. And you can see here our prediction done in a minute during the flood itself. So, of course, very useful to have this data instantaneously. This last ML, similar thing, but for the recovery stage, so after the event has happened, doing data fusion between very high-res imagery, medium-res optical, and SAR, which is radar, and basically showing the damaged areas. And this is, of course, hugely useful for insurance companies and other aid agencies who are coming into areas like Haiti. You can see here how it works. Here's the ground assessment, which is actually what really happened. And then here's our machine learning assessment, which was happened in the moment. And you can see how close that is and how valuable that information would be. Similarly, in an earthquake, the image on the left, my left, and then you can see the ML, again, making a decision or making a prediction very quickly about where the damaged buildings are, which is, of course, very useful. So the idea here is that we can use machine learning across these complex problems, from resilience planning to disaster response all the way through to recovery. And this notion that we have the tools and we have the data and we even have the economic case to do it. But the message I'm going to leave you with today is that all these data sets are completely unmanaged. They live in different places. They're all out of sync. There's no agreed standards. For any machine learning problem, 90% of the work is getting the data ready to actually make the predictions. This is the grand challenge. This is the moonshot. This is the work that we need to be doing as soon as we possibly can. So how might this change the world if we were to do this? If we were able to get these data sets organized in this way, what could we do? And this is really the idea I'd like to leave you with, is this notion that we're not going to make our cities resilient to the changes that are coming over the next few decades unless we know what to measure and how to deploy our resources. And so the idea of all this work is that eventually we can start to get to some sort of way of measuring resilience, that we can do what we do for our homes in terms of energy efficiency, but we can start to do for our cities and towns and make a resiliency rating. And that once we have this sort of tool, we can start to figure out the best ways to make our towns and cities more ready for the future that is coming. So with that, I'll leave you with that closing thought. I'd like to thank all our colleagues and researchers at NASA FTL Europe with ESA, a lot of this funding coming from ESA, Google Cloud Intel, and others, the University of Oxford in particular. And thank you so much for your time.